Hello, hello, hello. Test, test. Okay, this should be working. Let's see. Let's read through an entire one. And we are live. We are live. Reading the Times for Monday, October 25th, 2021. My name is SHAZZBARBARIC. I am running for the California 20th Congressional District. The ways you can help me out is by spreading the word. Venmo me $1 just to help, or $5 and I'll give you a sticker. I might still give you a sticker if you send me $1. And reserve books. I have 10bonepress.com, TENBONEPRESS.com. Reserve the books. I have a publishing company. Meditative wisdom, Zen Buddhism. Yeah, that's how I'm going to capitalize my congressional run, is the plan. I'm also going to do that by summarizing the news every day. Wisdom is the larger narrative. That's why it's very hard to pass along, because it's not facts, it's not knowledge. It's the system into which you put facts and knowledge. It's the application. It takes a lifetime of experience as well as gathering of information and facts, because it's the application. So using my wisdom I've gathered over my experience in my life and by reading Zen Buddhism, among other wisdom traditions, I'm going to apply them to the news. So here we go. First, we have to read the news. What is the title for this? This is based off the New York Times as of now. Let's see. A CIA fighter, this is for October 25th, 2021. A CIA fighter, a Somali bomb maker, and a faltering shadow war. The U.S. government has been reluctant to commit troops to Somalia since the Black Hawk Down episode of 1993, when Somali militia fighters killed 18 American service members in a blazing battle later depicted in books and Hollywood movies. Somalia has no time to waste. The arc of the faltering U.S. mission in Somalia can be seen in the stories of two men, an American and a Somali, on opposite sides of the fight. The CIA returned to Somalia in 2009, establishing a secure base at the Mogadishu airport and teaming up with the National Intelligence Security Agency, Somalia's fledgling spy agency. The Somalis handed everything to the CIA, including a memento, the dead militant's unusual model of rifle, said Hussein Sheikh Ali, then a senior Somali intelligence official and later Somalia's national security advisor. His boss, the station's Mogadishu bureau chief, Fahad Yassin, later went into politics and became Somalia's spy chief, a striking illustration of Somali complex layers. Although Washington is by far the largest foreign donor to Somalia, giving $500 million in 2020, few Somalis see evidence of that assistance because Somali partner organizations hide their American ties to avoid Shabbat reprisals. Inside Amazon's worst human resources problems. For at least a year and a half, including during periods of record profit, Amazon has been shortchanging new parents, patients dealing with medical crises, and other vulnerable workers on leave, according to a confidential report in the findings. On the findings. Not a word that there had ever been a problem, said James Watts, 54, who worked at Amazon in Chattanooga for 6 years before repeated heart attacks and strokes forced him to go on disability leave. Ms. Nantel said that Amazon regretted Mr. Watts' situation, that the process was too confusing, and that it was working to simplify the process of navigating leaves. Workers who had applied for leaves were penalized for missing work, triggering job abandonment notices and then terminations. An external assessment last fall found that the back office staff members who talked to employees do not understand the process for taking leaves and regularly gave incorrect information to workers. In one audit, which dragged on for 29 minutes, the phone agent told the worker that he was too new to be eligible for short term disability leave, when in fact, workers are eligible from the first day. Where facts were no match for fear. Just one second. Clean up my screen a little bit. Miss Grulkowski had just heard about a years in the making effort to designate her corner of central Montana a national heritage area, celebrating its role in the story of the American West. Miss Grulkowski set about blowing up that effort with everything she had. She collected addresses from a list of voters and spent $1,300 sending a packet denouncing the proposed heritage area to 1,498 farmers and ranchers. A heritage area, the bill's text asserted, would interfere with state and private property rights. In 2 hours of talking at his farm, Mr. Bandel could offer no evidence to back up that claim. Ms. Grolkowski, too, was unable to identify a single instance of a property owner being adversely affected by a heritage area. In the paper's information, in the paper's, let's see, place, information and misinformation about the heritage area spread on Facebook and in local outlets that parroted Miss Grolkowski. Last winter, a glossy magazine distributed to Montana farmers put the subject on its cover, headlined Intrusive Raid on Private Property Rights. Ms. Grolkowski badgered supporters of the heritage area to withdraw financial backing. Ignoring sanctions, Russia renews broad cyber surveillance operation. Russia's premier intelligence agency has launched another campaign to pierce thousands of U.S. government, corporate, and think tank computer networks. Microsoft officials and cybersecurity experts warned on Sunday, only months after President Biden imposed sanctions on Moscow in response to a series of sophisticated spy operations it had conducted around the world. Government officials confirmed that the operation, apparently aimed at acquiring data storage stored in the cloud, seemed to come out of the SVR, the Russian intelligence agency that was the first to enter the Democratic National Committee's networks during the 2016 election. Still, the operation suggests that even while the two governments say they are meeting regularly to combat ransomware and other maladies of the internet age, the undermining of networks continues apace in an arms race that has sped up as countries sought COVID-19 vaccine data and a range of industrial and government secrets. The Russian hackers apparently calculated that if they could infiltrate the resellers, those firms would have high level access to the data they wanted, whether it was government emails, defense technologies, or vaccine research. In the Solar Winds case late last year, targeting the supply chain meant that Russian hackers subtly changed the computer code of network management software used by companies and government agencies, surreptitiously inserting the corrupted code just as it was being shipped out to 18,000 users. In response to SolarWinds, the White House announced a series of deadlines for government agencies and all contractors dealing with federal government to carry out a new round of security practices that would make them harder targets for Russian, Chinese, Iran, and North Korean hackers. Heavy is the burden on Japan's royal woman. With the emperor and his family standing as symbols of traditional Japan, the royal women are subjected to concentrated versions of the broader gender inequality in the country, where a conservative streak in society often still consigns women to rigid roles. Although imperial women are not eligible to sit on the throne, the criticism they receive can be harsher than that for the men of the family, who are protected in part by their proximity to the line of succession. Do you have a good relationship with your mother in law? How are you supporting the men in your life? So many jobs must be done perfectly without a hitch. I don't think men in the imperial family are looked at this closely. Japan is slowly changing, with two women standing for prime minister during a recent government governing party leadership election. In the imperial family, the women are expected to adhere to the values of an earlier era, accompanying her husband Akihito as he traveled through Japan and internationally. She brought a human touch to the previously distant imperial family, kneeling to talk to victims of disasters and to people with disabilities. Many commentators hoped she might help modernize the fusty royal family and serve as a role model to Japan's young working women. Please don't feed the whale sharks. Fishing Town says it must to prosper. Whale sharks are migratory, but tourism dependent residents of Taiwan, like Mr. de Guzman, have kept at least some of them staying year round with a highly contentious practice of feeding the wild animals on a daily schedule. In terms of hunting in the past and tourism now in the present, human feeding has changed the whale shark's behavior. Each whale shark has a unique constellation of spots, which bear a resemblance to the stars in the night sky. The inspiration for its name in Madagascar, Mado Quintana, or many stars. In Javanese, it's Gegar Lintang, or stars on the back. In the past, local fishermen avoided the sharks. Luring de Guzman rebuilt his home with whale shark tourism money, adding concrete to what had been a hut constructed mostly of nipa, a species of palm. The provisioning practice has come under strong criticism, with the World Wildlife Fund, only one of many conservation organizations, faulting the idea of whale shark feeding and urging tourists in the Philippines to go instead to Donsol, a non provisioned site, to see them. Conservationists say that hand feeding has changed whale shark behavior, including more damaging encounters with surface hazards. Okay. As Hong Kong civil society buckles, one group tries to hold on. The Hong Kong Journalists Association has refused to fold, even as Hong Kong Security Secretary repeatedly singles it out for public criticism. These groups were important not just to Hong Kong or even China, but to all of Asia, said Maya Wang, a senior China researcher for Human Rights Watch. Amnesty International said on Monday that it was closing its local and regional offices in Hong Kong because the security law had made it impossible for human rights groups to operate in the city. The authorities removed displays from the group's museum and blocked access in Hong Kong to the group's website. The past 32 years with Hong Kong Alliance, keeping those memories alive, signaled that Hong Kong was different from mainland China. Richard Tsoi, the only officer of the group not in custody, said of the visuals. Another union, the Hong Kong Federation for Journalists, represents pro Beijing media. Kenyan Olympians killing exposes surge of violence against women. Her killing just days after her last race in Switzerland was a shock that energized a conservation in Kenya over how to combat violence against women, a long-standing problem. Violence against women and girls in Kenya is a part of is of pandemic proportions, said Agnes Odhiambo, a senior researcher on women's rights at Human Rights Watch in Nairobi. The story of Agnes should give us pause, she says, as it reflects the very big number of women who are murdered and killed in this country every day. Miss Tirop's killing has called attention to everyday harassment and danger that many Kenyan women face, and to the pressure confronting female athletes at home, even as they race to stardom abroad. Domestic violence is not an aberration affecting only poor or rural women, activists say, but one that afflicts those with means and status too. The case has drawn intense scrutiny in Kenya, where the authorities have been criticized for failing to provide adequate legal, health, and financial support to women facing domestic violence. No one is talking about women's safety in this country. It's seen as a non issue, said Adele Onyango, co author and co editor of the upcoming book, Our Broken Silence, a collection of essays and diary entries by fellow assault survivors and their relatives. At the end of the day, she said, the legal responsibility lies with the Kenyan government to prevent the killing, the rape, the beating, and the harassment of women. Abigail Arunga, who regularly writes about domestic and sexual violence, as a columnist with Kenya's leading newspaper, Daily Nation, said media coverage must also stop blaming women for their own deaths. See, just one second. Remove a Confederate statue, a Tennessee city did this instead. As Confederate monuments across the South began to come down after a 2019 white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, he wanted the 37-foot local statue known as Chip gone too. To be standing here now in the face of a statue that represents enslaving those people, and to know that because he was willing to do that, we won. What a powerful message. Franklin, a city of about 80,000 people, is the wealthiest and fastest growing county in the state. Mr. Jacobson had an alternative idea. Rather than focusing on removing the Confederate statue, he said, Franklin should share stories of local African Americans relevant to the Civil War. Imagine image matters, said Chris Williamson, a pastor in Franklin who helped lead the effort to erect the statue. I've seen a whole lot of Confederate statues in my day, said Chris Williamson, a pastor in Franklin who also led the effort. Franklin Franklin's elected leaders, united on the foolish story's approval, remain divided on whether the Confederate statue should be removed. Victims of Charlottesville rally argue that violence was planned. The plaintiffs accuse the organizers of the Charlottesville rally of plotting to foment the violence that left them injured, while the defendants counter that their views constituted free speech, however offensive others might find it, and that the bloodshed stemmed from self defense. The events further inflamed the country when President Donald J. Trump said there were very fine people on both sides. The trial in the case, called Sinez versus Kessler, after the lead plaintiff and the lead defendant, is expected to last at least 4 weeks and involve more than 65 plaintiffs, defendants, and lawyers. The Ku Klux Klan Act specifies that any violence must be plotted in advance, so the case may rest on conversations from Discord, a platform for group chats, as well as text messages, tweets, and other social media posts that discuss fomenting violence. The defendants include Richard B. Spencer, who epitomized the public emergence of the far right, which he sought to rebrand as the alt-right after his notorious Hail Trump, Hail Our People, Hail Victory speech in Washington in November 2016. Mr. Spencer is among at least 5 defendants representing themselves after he told the court last year that the case had been financially crippling because so many fundraising platforms expelled him. Jason E. Kessler, another defendant who is from Charlottesville, saw the rally as an opportunity to provide leadership in the right. Officers to testify about Eric Gardner's death in long delayed inquiry. The anguished pleas of Eric Gardner as he struggled in a New York City police officer's chokehold in 2014 galvanized millions, and his last words, I can't breathe, repeated 11 times and captured on video, became a rallying cry for a protest movement demanding that police officers be held accountable. In the 7 years since Mr. Garner died on a Staten Island sidewalk, the deaths of Black men and women in police custody, including some like George Floyd, whose words in their final moments powerfully echoed Mr. Garner's dying pleas, touched off a wave of demands for change. The process does not directly hold the potential for a new discipline or fresh settlements. The officer who choked Mr. Garner was not charged criminally, but was eventually fired from the force, and Mr. Garner's family reached a settlement with the city. What really happened on that day, she added, there's no justice for Eric because he's dead. For me, there can only be closure. The killing of Mr. Gardner in July 2014 came at the beginning of a series of deaths at police officers' hands. For Miss Carr and other relatives, much remained unclear for years. What was the exact chain of events? To what extent did Mr. Garner receive medical treatment at the scene? How did his prior sealed arrest history become public? 2 years ago, the Garner family sought a judicial inquiry, a rare process under the city charter to answer those questions, among others. Over 2 to 3 weeks, about A dozen witnesses are expected to testify, including Officer Justin D'Amico, who was Mr. Pantelio's partner during the arrest, Sergeant Kizzy Adonis, who lost 20 vacation days after being accused of failing to properly supervise officers at the scene, and Lieutenant Christopher Bannon, a police commander who texted one of his officers that Mr. Garner's death was not a big deal because we were effecting a lawful arrest. The police department deferred comments to the city's law department. Test, 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 just making sure we're still live. Questions on Baldwin shooting turn to assistant director. Uh-oh, messed that one up. Okay, we're gonna skip that one. This is a work in progress. Get that summary in. Let me make a note of that. The point of this is to have a auditable account of the news so we can track the now we'll take a little break. So we can track the narratives. The theory is that we're not talking about the things we should be talking about. There's only so much emotional bandwidth. The intelligence agencies, the government, the CIA, they've been studying human behavior for a while since they discovered acid and used it in human trials, invented their own psychedelics, did other experiments with torture. This is all well documented through Freedom of Information Acts. So if you do believe that the world is being coercively manipulated, or at the very least that we are ignoring existential problems, COVID being one of them, if you document the government response in America, it's among the worst in the world, definitely among advanced nations. Why are we ignoring our existential problems? Another one is climate change. The world as a whole is failing to address that. The shootings in America, the suicides by our youth, violent suicides, not only killing themselves, but choosing to kill other people. So, what's going on? And my theory, after meditating on this, looking at the news and reading and looking at my own life for the last couple of years, I got the idea to run for politics in 2018. Run for president. It was that's a large target. I've since scaled it back to Congress, which seems more approachable, especially with the newly elected Congress people who are filling up the news with their shenanigans. It seems like the bar has been lowered almost to the floor. But my question that I would like to bring up during this run is, what are we talking about? And more specifically, what are we not talking about? And then why? So that's why we're starting by reading the news every day. If I get funding, we are going to turn this into a job and have someone do it. But when you're starting a company, you have to originate the roles yourself. A good manager does that, I believe, in order to make sure it's not an unreasonable task, and also to get a feel for it. So I'm doing the job that hopefully we can then contract someone else to do. Reading the New York Times every day, I pass it through a summary bot in order to take anywhere from like 50 to 80% of it down into manageable chunks. It should be an hour and a half a day. We're about a third of the way through here. But there's going to be some hiccups in the road as I start this process. I did it a couple of years ago, about early 2020, and it's a good way to summarize the daily news. And it's only one of a couple of tools we're going to develop during this congressional run. Biden meets with Manchin and Schumer as Democrats race to finish social policy bill. President Biden huddled with key Democrats on Sunday to iron out crucial spending and tax provisions as they race to wrap up their expansive social safety net legislation before his appearance at a UN climate summit next week. Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California said Democrats were close to completing the bill, displaying confidence that the negotiations over issues like paid leave, tax increase, and Medicare benefits that have bedeviled the party for months would soon end. In order to bypass united Republican opposition and pass the final bill, Democrats are using an arcane budget process known as reconciliation, which shields fiscal legislation from a filibuster but would require every Senate Democrat to unite behind the plan in an eventual divided chamber. Democrats are facing a new sense of urgency to finish the legislation before Mr. Biden's trip to major United Nations climate change conference, where he hopes to point to the bill as proof that the United States is serious about leading the efforts to fight global warming. The president looked us in the eye and he said, I need this before I go and represent the United States in Glasgow. American prestige is on the line. Representative Ro Khanna, a California Democrat who met with Mr. Biden last week at the White House, said on Fox News Sunday, that's what they said on Fox News Sunday. Democrats are also increasingly eager to deliver the bipartisan legislation to Mr. Biden's desk before elections for governor in Virginia and New Jersey on November 2nd to show voters the party is making good on its promise to deliver sweeping social change. The West Virginia Democrat has been clear that he wants to see a much cheaper, less generous, more targeted, and less environmentally friendly measure than the one Mr. Biden and Democrats originally envisioned. Okay, yeah, that was that one. Bomb cyclone and atmospheric river, Palmo, California, with rain and wind. California braced for winter storms and flash floods on Monday as meteorologists warned of a bomb cyclone and an atmospheric river, a convergence of storms that unleashed heavy rain to parts of the Bay Area, along with high winds, flash floods, and the potential for heavy snow in the Sierra Nevada. From Marin County to the area just south of Big Sur along the Pacific coast, flash flood watches were in effect until late Sunday night and in some areas early Monday morning, including parts of the San Francisco Peninsula. The National Weather Service issued a winter weather warning on Monday with heavy snow in the Sierra Nevada through Tuesday morning. After heavy rainfall in Santa Barbara County on Monday, emergency management authorities told the residents to shelter in place and to go to inner rooms or higher floors because of life threatening flash flooding and debris flows in the Alisal fire burn area. Excessive rainfall over El Dorado County's burn scar, which was caused by the Caldor fire, could cause life threatening flash floods, the National Weather Service in Sacramento said on Monday. Parts of Fresno and Madera counties were also given flash flood warnings on Monday, as heavy rainfall made the ground susceptible to slides in the Creek Burn Scar area, the Weather Service said. I think that's good. Just one second. Oh, that's why. Yeah, we're going to put all of this into a, that is what is going on there. We're going to put all of this into a shareable Google Doc so you can also read what I'm reading. That way, all of this text and all of these authors are auditable. So we can see if there's a narrative that's being shaped over time, which diverges from objective reality. And that's really where the war, I believe, in the modern age is being fought over the definition of objective reality. So this is a form of showing your work. How is Dune so prescient about climate change? Thank this Native American tribe. While fishing near his home in western Washington as a youth, he met a Hall man he described as Indian Henry, who semi adopted him for 2 years and taught him the ways of his people. Mr. Herbert told his son and biographer, Brian Herbert, what lessons did Mr. Martin teach Frank Herbert? In the 1970s, Mr. Herbert wrote a novel, Soul Catcher, seemingly based on their relationship that offers some clues. While Mr. Herbert was developing Dune, Mr. Hansen was writing his own book, a memoir called Twilight on the Thunderbird, which Mr. Herbert read in manuscript. They're going to turn this whole planet into a wasteland, just like North Africa. Though initially startled by that view, Mr. Herbert agreed, responding that the world would become a big dune according to Mr. Herbert's son Brian. And Brian Herbert's understanding, the environmentalism of Dune was partly based on conversations between his Mr. Hansen and his father. Seeing what logging had done to La Push inspired Howard Hansen to warn Frank Herbert that the world might become a wasteland. With Mr. Hansen's input, Mr. Herbert wrote a novel, Dune, imagining just that. The rotting core of the Republican Party. Resistance to taxation is the rotting core of the modern Republican Party. Republicans in recent decades have sharply reduced the federal income tax rates imposed on wealthy people and big companies, but their opposition to taxation goes beyond that. The IRS estimated in 2019 that Americans conceal from taxation more than half of income that is not subject to some form of third-party verification, like a W-2, the form that governments use to verify ordinary wage income. The Republican Party was reborn in the 1970s under the banner of resistance to taxation, led by anti-tax men like Jack Kemp and Ronald Reagan. Opposition to progressive income taxation also draws strength from an imagined democratic ideal in which the people who vote for taxation, pay for the taxes, and get the benefits are all one and the same. In enabling resistance to lawful taxation, Republicans are engaged in an even more direct assault. Biden tepid in the face of a catastrophe. After months of tiptoeing around the issue of altering or eliminating the Senate filibuster rule to protect voting rights and therefore democracy itself, after an unprecedented year of Republican assaults, President Biden has finally said he is open to changing the rules. You can't move in the course of one exchange from saying that we might soon have to fundamentally change the filibuster to saying you're open to fundamentally changing it, to saying it remains to be seen what that change would or should look like. In the end, it will all work out. It will all work out. Some version of the spending bill will be passed, which will free the president to defend voting rights more forcefully. Biden and the Democratic leadership want us to trust them, to trust Senators Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. They want us to trust a system that has not earned that trust and often betrays it. I can imagine a moment after the social spending bill vote in which Biden cranks up the pressure on passing a voter protection bill, having public meetings with stakeholders, traveling the country to lobby for it, and possibly even giving an address from the Oval Office to support it. The debate over a Jefferson statue is missing some surprising history. In 1834, Mr. Levy contracted, paid for, and shipped two likenesses of Jefferson to America, one for Congress, cast in bronze, and the other, its painted plaster model, for New York. Statues were just a piece of Mr. Levy's efforts. In erecting the statues and preserving Monticello, Mr. Levy hoped to promote appreciation of Thomas Jefferson, particularly his stance on religious liberty. To Mr. Levy, who donated it, the very same statue served as a symbol of religious liberty. Mr. Levy, oh, I lost it. Mr. Levy considered it a tribute to a man who, he wrote, did much to mold our republic in a form in which a man's religion does not make him ineligible for political or government life. Statues can convey multiple messages, as can historical memory, rather than choosing between the memory of racial injustice and the embrace of religious liberty. Let the Danger's statue serve as a reminder that Jefferson embodied both at once, as did Mr. Levy. Let's see, just one second. A $1,775 doctor's visit cost about $350 in Maryland. Here's why. An independent state commission of health care experts in Maryland, appointed by the governor, has effectively told hospitals what each of them may charge, with a bit of leeway, requiring every insurer to reimburse a hospital at the same rate for a medical intervention in a system called Allpayer rate setting. In 2014, Maryland also instituted a global cap and budget for each hospital in the state. Hospitals supported the deal, which required a federal waiver to experiment with the new system. Because even though the hospitals could no longer bill high rates for patients with commercial insurance, the state guaranteed they would get a reasonable, consistent rate for all their services, regardless of insurer. In subsequent decades, hospitals did end runs around price controls by simply ordering more hospital visits and tests. Dr. Joshua Scharfstein, who was the state's health and mental hygiene secretary, met skeptical hospital administrators to sell the concept, as he described it, assuring them that the hospitals would still get reasonable revenue while gaining new opportunities to improve the health of their communities with money to invest in preventative services. What's more, working with a fixed budget has provided incentives for hospitals to keep patients out, resulting in programs like better outpatient efforts to manage chronic illness and putting doctors in senior housing to keep residents out of hospitals through on site care. Living with financial constraints may be at least partly why John Hopkins' main entrance is pleasant but functional, lacking the elegant art filled marble lobbies I often encounter at its peer hospitals. A spotlight on the women who write the plays. Miss Rebeck tells it like it is. Female playwrights have been passed over for male playwrights at almost every theater in the country, not because men write better plays, but because of prejudice. I've been teaching writing at the New School and elsewhere for 40 years, writing books and essays even longer. And just wrote my first play, which I've started to market. Women are the primary buyers of theater tickets, but not the primary buyers of plays. The fairest way for plays submitted to theaters and producers to be judged, fairest way for plays submitted to theaters and producers to be judged only on their merit is for playwright's name not to appear on the play. Neither gender nor race should elevate one play over another. If a producer confesses that he thinks women can't write as well as men, let him be caught choosing a play he loves and then finding out after he has made an offer to produce it that it was written by a woman. I was so happy to be in the seat of at the theater for six on Broadway the other night. In India, Facebook grapples with an amplified version of its problems. Facebook did not have enough resources in India and was unable to grapple with the problems it had introduced there, including anti Muslim posts, according to its documents. Company documents showed that Facebook installed measures to demote misinformation during the November election in Myanmar, including a disinformation shared by the Myanmar military junta. The leak of internal documents by a former Facebook employee has provided an intimate look at the operations of the secretive social media company and renewed calls for better regulations of the company's wide reach into the lives of its users. In September, the Wall Street Journal published the Facebook Files, a series of reports based on leaked Facebook documents. During an interview with 60 Minutes that aired on October 3rd, Frances Haugen, Facebook product manager who left the company in May, revealed that she was responsible for the leak of those internal documents. Documents from the Facebook papers show the degree to which Facebook knew of extremist groups on the site trying to polarize American voters before the election. Why Amazon is in business with Judge Judy. It's called IMB TV, started in 2019 with little fanfare. IMB TV is free, supported by ads, mostly stocked with reruns, and about to come out of the shadows. The term LMAO came up on a case the other day, for example, and she needed me to interpret. Judge Scheinlein has ditched the much discussed clip on ponytail she wore in the final seasons of Judge Judy, but she remains defiant, a plain spoken star at a time when expressing an incongruent opinion can result in vicious blowback online. Amazon is counting on Judge Scheinlein's chutzpah to help establish IMBD TV as a bigger player in what has become surprisingly one of the hottest areas in media, free, ad supported video on demand. At the moment, only 33% of entertainment consumers are aware of IMB TV, ranking the service near the back of the ad supported pack, according to Screen Engine ASI. Most competitors are in the 40s. Last year, IMB TV rolled out its first original drama, Alex Rider, based on the popular spy novels for teenagers. How much Judge Scheinlein does One Planet need? You can never have enough of someone who is as smart and as funny and as entertaining as she is, said Lauren Anderson, IMB TV's co host of programming. Will Judge Shinling's older fans be able to find IMDb? I think I've been saying that wrong the whole time. IMDb TV's corner of the internet. Judy Justice also represents an experiment for. It's basically a commercial inside the big Facebook leak. On the call, Ms. Hagen offered to share redacted versions of the trove of Facebook documents under an embargo to be set by the group. Ms. Hagen told the participants that she felt the journal could have published more articles on the documents she provided, especially on Facebook's effort on nations Facebook's effect on nations where English is not the main language. In September, the Wall Street Journal published the Facebook Files, a series of reports based on leaked Facebook documents. During an interview with 60 Minutes that aired October 3rd, Frances Haugen, a Facebook product manager who left the company in May, revealed that she was responsible for the leak of those internal documents. Documents from the Facebook papers show the degree to which Facebook knew of extremist groups on its site trying to polarize American voters before the election. Another Times reporter, Ryan Mack, had dropped in late that afternoon with a heads up. The Times would be publishing an article on Facebook's conduct in the run up to the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol. Based, he assured rivals, on documents we got before the formation of the consortium. It seemed to many others to be within the letter of their agreement, but also an attempt by the Times to get ahead of the competitors who hadn't obtained the documents separately. A rare win in the cat and mouse game of ransomware. Amisoft hustled to track down dozens of victims in the United States, Britain, and Europe so it can help them secretly unlock their data. Imagine you have a problem. You think it's unfixable. Everyone tells you it's unfixable. Your paranoia is in overdrive, and then someone shows up at your front door and says, "Hey, by the way, I can help you." To assuage victims' concerns, Amisoft researchers asked their contacts at cybersecurity companies and government agencies around the world to vouch for them. While Amisoft would not identify the victims, it said they had included key manufacturers, transportation companies, and food suppliers across the continental Europe, Britain, and the United States. Amisoft had been finding black matter victims through post to a Google-owned platform, VirusTotal, which is a kind of search engine for malware. Amisoft monitored the chats to see if cybercriminals or victims dropped the name of their organization, then used that information to contact the victims. In the process, Amisoft lost a key way to reach the victims. Why the cable company is selling why why the cable company is selling TVs. Interested because of what they represent, a corporate land grab to become the starting point for all things streaming in America's homes. Their objective is to make money from selling ads or by pointing people to watch Halloween on a streaming service that pays for the promotion. Comcast wants to use its TV sets to pitch its Peacock streaming service. Amazon Fire TV nudges people to buy online movies from Amazon and has prominent promotions for other streaming apps that pay Amazon to get right in front of your eyeballs. At times, Roku streaming devices haven't included some entertainment apps, including YouTube TV and HBO Max, because of financial spats between the companies. Entertainment programmers like Netflix and Disney want to get bigger themselves, so they have more power than the distributors like Amazon, Roku, and Comcast. The difference between an unpaid and paid student athlete? Not much. The NCAA has long claimed that the essence of college sports is amateurism. It's euphemism for not paying the players. What's more, if college athletes were paid, the distinction between college and professional sports would be erased, and fans would suddenly realize how inferior teenagers playing for the universities were compared to the pros. Here's how Mr. Emmert put it in 2014, testifying in an antitrust case. Fans appreciate the fact that these are indeed college athletes. They recognize that they are students. They recognize that they are not the greatest athletes. He added, to convert college sports into a professional sports would be tantamount to converting it to a minor league sport. And we know in the United States, minor league sports are not particularly successful. Until now, there was no way to test this thesis. As an economist and NCAA critic, Ted Tatos put it on Twitter, fascinating to watch schools go from NIL will end college sports to pick our school because we offer the best NIL opportunities. It's almost as though they always knew their previous position was utter nonsense. People lie? No. Of course, the most important consequence of players making outside income is that it has had zero effect on the business of college football or any other sport. As Mr. Schwartz predicted, fans love college football just as much today as they did before players were able to earn money. Yet the NCAA still maintains that paying players an actual salary would bring about the ruination of college sports. The jobs made them get vaccinated. They refused. Under the threat of losing their jobs, hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers finally got a COVID-19 vaccine. Ms. Valdez, an anti vaccine mandate activist who has been involved in protests against vaccines and masks in the city, is also part of a sizable, unwavering contingent across the United States whose resistance to the vaccines have won out over paychecks or who have given up careers entirely. In interviews, New Yorkers who have given up their livelihoods spoke of their opposition to the vaccines as rooted in fear or deeply held conviction, resistance, or a deeply held conviction, resistance to vaccination as a principle to live by, one they put above any health, job, or financial consideration. About 84% of adult New Yorkers have now received at least one vaccine dose in the face of state and city mandates, as well as requirements imposed by some private companies. The FDA has authorized booster shots for millions of recipients of the Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The more we comply, the more they are going to take. First, it's the masks, then it's the weekly testing, then it's the vaccine and booster shots. And our last article for the day, an unexpected pandemic consequence frustrates Florida's biggest city. One man in Florida's largest city wrote to officials that the smell and flies were getting bad after 6 weeks of waiting for his yard waste to be picked up. Why would you go to work for the city of Jacksonville for $40,000 a year as a CDL driver when you can go out and make $80,000 work for FedEx? Said Ronnie M. Burris, the business manager for the Laborers International Union of North America Local 630, which represents sanitation workers. Dallas, which uses temporary laborers in the back of garbage trucks, saw its worker pool decline by about 30%, said Cliff Gillespie, the city's interim assistant director. The city did what economists say the only way to head off. The city did what economists say is the only way to head off the shortages. It raised workers' pay. Truck drivers employed by the city went to a base rate of 20 or 20.50 an hour from 16.50 an hour, depending on their license. Keith Banasiak, the chief operating officer and senior vice president of Waste Pro, one of the city's private haulers, said it raised wages in Jacksonville more than 20% from last year and offered bonuses ranging from $2,500 to $5,000. And that has been Reading the Times for Monday, October 25th, 2021. Reading the Times for Monday, October 25th, 2021. We are going to end this stream, check the audio. Hopefully it recorded. This is the first day, the first test. Hopefully it is the beginning of grounding our politics in objective reality. Let's discuss that before we end. How long has this gone? 49 minutes. I'll try to keep it to an hour so I can turn these into a podcast that people can listen to later as well. What is this? This is a logo. Flash politics. See, here we go. Bah. That's pretty cool. What? There's a flag behind me too, right? We can sell the flag. We can sell the stickers. We can sell the whole movement. There you go. What is this? This is another logo. Peace. Don't we want peace within as well as without? inside as well as outside, your neighbors, other countries. War is costly. I signed up for the army, for the military when I was 18. They would have sent me to Iraq. I'm too much of a troublemaker when I was young, so I got kicked out instead. Well, it was a mutual breakup. The military said, this is probably not for you. And I said, yeah, it's probably not. So we left on amicable terms. But I dodged literal bullets. Some of my friends went to Iraq, multiple tours, stop lost, other places. I had signed up for military intelligence. So perhaps this is in my nature to put information together and look at the larger trend. If I'd stayed in for those 20 years, I'm 39 now, so 20 odd years, I would have been, if I'd stayed on the career path and stayed in intelligence and gone into officer training, and I would say like a warrant officer 5, or maybe a higher level sergeant, or maybe like my grandfather, I would have been an officer, a full-fledged officer, captain, what is it? I don't know, something higher than that. So by blood and by characteristics and by testing, I am good at analyzing information and putting it together. What have I put together here with the symbol? I took the symbol for electricity, for grounding electricity. I put the F and the P backwards on it. It's also pretty easy to make a logo. We can signal each other. We can have fun with it. The colors could change. It's just sunset colors. This is another symbol, but that's for my later narrative development. But right now, just about this FP, grounding in objective reality. That's what we're meditating on here, and we're going to be doing it daily as I catch up to. I'm a little bit behind. It was a very busy week last week, so we're going to catch up to daily news recaps, seeing what narratives are out there in the news, using the New York Times, the paper of record, as just one source. As we automate this process, perhaps we can bring in other sources. I have a couple other tools I'm working on right now in order to quantify objective reality. And the reason we're doing that is because my theory is that we're being manipulated. We're being emotionally manipulated through a distortion of objective reality with coercive narratives that tap into our emotional bias, but then get us emotionally hysterical. And that's why we have more violence, more. I've done the protest. I'm going to source all of my life on here. I've been gathering it for the last couple of years. I was there in Occupy Wall Street. I got arrested with them in New York City. I got a firsthand account of that movement. And I have a little mini documentary I made about that time. And I've been writing. I've been writing since I was 16, 17. I had an underground newspaper in high school where we protested the World Trade Organization meeting in Seattle. So as the world's been moving on this pace of authoritarianism, basically larger systems, more pyramidal in shape, less democratic within our country as well as around the world. I believe that is objective reality, and that is what the facts bear out, and the narrative that I'm trying to create best represents those facts. I'm going to document the narratives that are out there right now, as displayed in the New York Times and other news sources, and other politicians that will be my eventual opposition. So document their narratives, their explanations of reality, compared to mine, my narratives and my explanations of reality. And I'll be honest, I'm not finished making mine. This is a work in progress, but I have my hypotheses as a good scientist should have. But then also we're going to run some experiments and we're going to test those hypotheses to find out what objectively is true about our reality. I believe that's the best way to go about this. And I've tried to be as objective and honest about my own past as I present my own data for you to analyze. If I err, tell me but where, and let us all grow in love and wisdom together. Yours for the revolution, SHAZZBARBARIC, signing off.